Gang, the first post-Labor Day polling has just dropped, and it is absolutely devastating. And I do mean utterly devastating for Kamala Harris. We're going to see how Cackles just got her worst news yet, and why Democrats are bracing for a complete campaign collapse. Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you stay sane in these insane times. So let me encourage you to smack that bell and subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss a single episode where we analyze the latest polls and the trends as we march towards November. Plus, we get a front row seat to amazing things happening all over the world for conservatives. So again, smack that bell and subscribe button. Also, you don't want to miss tonight's Monday night live stream. I've got some exciting news to share about a big in-person event that you don't want to miss coming up before the election. You're going to love it. So make sure to tune in tonight to tonight's Monday night live stream. And finally, before we dive in, I want all of you who are so tirelessly working to save our country to click on that link below and begin taking care of yourselves and your own health. And health starts actually with our livers. Think about it, gang. Our poor livers. I mean, we literally throw everything that we ingest at our livers. And that's why so many of us suffer from a fatty liver that makes us gain weight and lose energy. But thanks to today's sponsor, there really is a very real solution. Liver Health Formula is an all-natural supplement. It contains 12 clinically proven botanicals that help recharge and protect your liver. It's manufactured right here in the USA, and it's approved by independent American doctors. And if you click on that link below right now, you can try Liver Health Formula, and you're going to get a free bottle of blood sugar formula absolutely free when you order today. So don't let a fatty liver keep you sluggish and inactive. Remember, gang, if you don't know, I actually recently just lost 60 pounds, and I could say it was one of the best decisions I ever made. So now it's your turn. Click on that link below or go to getliverhelp.com/Turley and claim your free bonus gift. That's getliverhelp.com/Turley. If you thought the Democrats were panicking late last week, their nightmare just got a whole lot worse. The Kamala campaign is officially fizzling out. The New York Times Siena poll, the first post-Labor Day poll, which tends to be a bit of a bellwether poll for November, it just dropped over the weekend, and it shows President Trump with a 1-point lead over Cackles' Kamala. Now, that's head-to-head. With a full roster with Jill Stein and Cornel West, Trump's lead grows to 2 points, 47-45. Now, if you want to understand what an absolute disaster this is for Kamala, all you have to do is compare this poll to the New York Times poll that dropped at the same time the 2020 campaign. That poll, that first post-Labor Day poll, showed Biden with a near 10-point lead over Trump. He was leading him 50-41. In an election where Biden, quote-unquote, won by just 40,000 votes, he was at this time in the election up by nearly 10 points. By that measure, Trump is absolutely crushing Kamala. But this is just the beginning of this Democrat disaster. The national average is just the tip of the iceberg. It gets worse. Take a look at how Trump is doing in the various regions of the country. So there are 4 major regions in this polling. You got the Northeast, South, West, and Midwest. Take a look at these numbers. Trump is dominating everywhere with the exception of the Northeast. He's up 11 in the Midwest, he's up 17 in the South, and he's even up an astonishing 16 in the West. But if you look to get a sense of just how much Trump is absolutely dominating, compare how he's doing in the Midwest with how he did in 2016, 2020. Now, keep in mind, the Midwest includes the key swing states of Wisconsin and Michigan. Look at these numbers. Back at the same time in 2016, Trump was leading the Midwest region by just over 4 points, 4.3. In 2020, his lead shrank to 2.1. So in 2016, Trump led by 4, and in 2020, he led by 2. Look at his lead now. Trump's lead over Kamala has hit double digits. He leads her by 11 points. That's 3x the lead he had over Hillary just before he crushed her in November with over 300 electoral votes. Now, Needless to say, the election forecast models just keep swinging more and more in Trump's favor. Here's the latest from the Democrat darling Nate Silver. Trump has now opened up a whopping 28-point lead over Kamala in the Electoral College prediction poll. Trump now has a 64% chance of winning in November, whereas Kamala has dropped to a dismal 36%. It was just on Friday of last week that Trump's chances of winning the White House just passed the 60% mark in Silver's and the RCP averages forecast models. They were giving Trump a 61.4% chance of winning the presidency. Kamala dropped to just 37% chance. And even a few days prior to that, back in the middle of the week last week, Trump's chances were at 56% and Kamala's were in the low 40s. So Trump keeps going up and up and up, and Kamala keeps going down and down and down. And we could be fairly certain that this pattern will continue all throughout September and October. In other words, it's just going to get worse and worse for Kamala. And again, it's not hard to see why. Look at these numbers. 55% of voters, a clear majority, see Harris as, quote, more of the same. More of the same of what they've been getting with Sleepy Joe. And 53% of voters see Trump as representing a, quote, major change from what we have. Now, again, this is huge corroboration of what we've been seeing now for months. Rich Barris, the People's pundit pollster, our good friend, he's been calling out the Democrats' bluff here for months now. Remember, the Democrats believed that they could save their chances at the White House by simply switching out Biden for another candidate. So the assumption here was that the problem, the electoral problem, was simply Biden's senility. The whole world saw what all the Democrats, including Kamala and the entire legacy media apparatus, spent the last 3.5 years hiding. The whole world finally saw it. They couldn't hide it anymore. But they could get rid of him. They can't hide him, but they can replace him. And if they do that, they're good to go. That was the assumption. But that's emphatically not what the polling was showing. All the data showed that voters were rejecting Biden because they were overwhelmingly rejecting his policies. They were rejecting his economic policies. They were rejecting his disastrous policies at the southern border. They were rejecting his foreign policy. The senility was just sort of like, it explained why all the policies were so bad. The policies were symbolic of his cognitive degeneration. And so what Barris and others were arguing is by switching Biden out with his own vice president, with someone from the very same administration that's been giving us policies that the vast majority of the country rejects, the Democrats were going to find out very quickly that they were not going to move the needle in the least. They would be stuck right where they were just before Biden's cognitive collapse was on full display. Again, remember, the whole reason for that disastrous debate so early in the election season at the end of June was because Biden's poll numbers were that dangerously bad. The debate was supposed to jumpstart his polling. The Democrats are now right back to where they started, precisely because Kamala can't find her way out of Biden's policy shadow. Here's the electoral map as it stands. According to the election forecast, Trump is on course to win 312 electoral votes. That's 8 more than he won in 2016. Again, we obviously cannot be complacent here. We'll talk more about this in a moment, but this is no time to get cocky. This is no time to get complacent. But seriously, I mean, if you want to know how bad things are for Kamala, you need look no further than what the vile neocon anti-Trump Bill Kristol is saying as of this weekend. Quote, distressing, depressing, alarming. After everything, after January 6th, after clear evidence of the second term would be far more authoritarian than the first. My God. After the ever-increasing radicalization of the MAGA world, Trump now has more support than he had in 2016 and 2020. I'm seriously, I'm sorry. Bill, are you just realizing this? What rock have you been living under for the last year? It took a New York Times poll to wake you out of your neocon, pro-war, pro-deep state echo chamber? A single poll? Had you been watching this channel for the last year, the last freaking year, Bill, we've had data that shows that Trump has amassed a support base that far exceeds anything amassed either in 2016 or 2020. His polling over the last 12 months has far surpassed his polling from either 2016 or 2020. And you're just figuring this out this weekend? Pathetic doesn't even begin to describe it. Now, besides Trump absolutely crushing it here, what does the dropping of this poll really mean? Because remember, the New York Times could have buried this poll. They've done it before. They buried another one several weeks back that rumor has it showed Trump up over Biden by double digits. They buried that poll. That was a pre-debate poll. Why didn't they bury this one? Because it was so devastating to Kamala. It looks like the New York Times just tried to resolve a dilemma, a conundrum that the legacy media has been going through over the last 2 weeks. In the days following that disastrous Democrat convention, where all the data showed that Kamala got literally no bounce whatsoever, which is a disaster in and of itself, the legacy media had a conundrum. Do they continue with this charade? Do they continue pushing these concocted, fabricated polls riddled with response bias in the hopes that they would at some point dupe enough voters to finally vote for Kamala? Or do they start openly hitting the panic button, admitting that their month-long fraud has not worked? That's the conundrum. And our good friend Rich Barris has been analyzing the polling and noted that when all is said and done, the response bias polls have basically all dried up. I mean, there isn't anymore. Hillary's response bias polls didn't start evaporating until mid-October. Biden's response bias polls, the polls that said he was supposed to win Wisconsin by 17 points, he ended up, quote, winning it by less than 1 point, by the way. Those response bias polls never evaporated for the whole of 2020. Here we are at the beginning of September, and Kamala's response bias polls have all disappeared. They're gone. In other words, there are no more response bias polls to push. And so with the dropping of this poll, the left-wing activists disguised as journalists over at the New York Times are basically saying, yo, Dems, you better come up with something else that we can peddle on your behalf. We'll be happy to. But if you don't, you're going to get beat worse than in 2016. That's all the data we're seeing right now. Kamala is poised to be even more of a disaster than Hillary was. That's what this poll drop by the New York Times is really telling their fellow Democrats. In other words, the jig is up. There were no more puff polls to push. And gang, the news is even worse than this. The voting for 2024 just got started, and you are not going to believe what's happening. And that is what we're going to talk about in our next video.